Get involved in the community as well is also really good. There's always people who are willing to help you out there. Yeah.
Could you jump into that more in terms of the Webflow community and what is that like, and what have you potentially learned or discovered through being involved in the Webflow community?
So much. I mean, first of all, you go there and it's just people who are interested in the same thing as you. So that's just a bonus, like straight off the bat, just people with common interests. There's no harm at all in like getting to know those people and eventually like becoming friends. Second of all, like, I mean, just commercial opportunities as well. People always maybe like have a project that's not right for them or need some extra help. There's always opportunities there, especially when you're starting out. If you go there to people and say, listen, I'm open for business, maybe at the beginning you'll do it slightly cheaper because you're still learning this and the other. People will have opportunities for you. And you'll learn a lot as well. Like there's always talks and stuff like that at the events, and you'd be like, oh, I didn't even think of that. I didn't know that existed. So yeah, you can learn a lot from it as well. The community is really great. I would like say maybe just never try and get yourself like too jammed into one community, because you don't want to be like, I don't know, at the hand of Webflow, you know what I mean, the whole time, just too pinned into that community. But going to events with people with similar interests and stuff like that is so valuable.
Interesting. And then thinking about, feeling, very close to Webflow, getting hammed in, I think was your expression.
Yeah.
What for you, in a broad way, what for you are the pros and cons of Webflow compared to other platforms?
Sure. I guess it kind of depends on your use case. I'll speak mainly on like marketing websites, because if we're talking about e-commerce, then there's just like a giant there that is clearly the best, which is Shopify.
Gotcha.
So it's not really comparable, and the e-commerce on Webflow isn't that great. But if we're talking about like marketing websites, then the pros, I would say, like I said, very fast development cycle. You can go and make changes and it can be live in like minutes. They're bringing out a lot more features to do with components and stuff now, which makes it easier for non-developers to go in and make edits and even build pages really quickly. The CMS is great and easy to use, so that's great for editors and content people. And at the lower level, the pricing's quite fair as well. The cons, I would say, is it's not open source. So like WordPress, for example, is open source. There's like a few competitors popping up that is open source. It's not the end of the world. It kind of means you probably end up with a cleaner end product because there is people like owning it.
For someone who might not know anything about what open source means or is,
Sure.
in the context of a platform that you can log into, what does open source mean, both conceptually and practically?
So yeah, conceptually, it basically means that the code or the way the product's built is open for you to see. So you can literally go and find exactly how they built that feature, exactly why they did it and stuff like that. So that means you can effectively add your own stuff on as well. So if there's a feature you don't have and you're a good enough developer, you can go in there and just basically make it yourself, which is great. And making it open kind of implies you're not hiding anything. It's like a bit of a symbol to the community. It's like, okay, well, we were open with what we're doing because it's really good, and it's less kind of commercialized in that sense. Practically, it maybe does mean you end up with a bit more of a Frankenstein of a product, especially if people are building their own plugins and stuff like that. Maybe a bit less clean and doesn't look as great because people build their own aesthetics and stuff like that. But yeah, you can end up with a lot more features in a product a lot quicker when you've got the whole community working on it rather than kind of keeping it behind closed doors. In the case of Webflow, they built a really great product anyway, and they are creating that like the app marketplace, which will probably allow for a lot of this. But yeah, being open source would be an advantage, I'm guessing.
Makes sense. And then thinking about another marketing platform that's particularly used a lot in B2B, but I think B2C as well, Figma.
Yeah.
How does Figma and Workflow work well together or not work well together?
Yeah, I mean, so they kind of have two different purposes, but I think as the technology is getting better, they're almost like converging. Like, I don't think it'd be too far away when we have a world where like Figma can be your website or you can design in Webflow, but Figma is for design, so it basically has like no barriers, let's say. So you can kind of draw something here, create a square here, this, that, and the other. And there's no responsiveness to it. There's not like locked into any sort of, unless you use auto layout or something like that, but there's no like kind of like rules like saying it should be this size at this and the other. You can do whatever you want and be really creative with it. Webflow still like has to abide by like the laws of like HTML and CSS, right? So it's like a box inside a box. At this breakpoint, this changes to that, this, that, and the other. So it's a lot more rigid. So some people do go straight to Webflow if you're kind of like creative enough to see it. But a lot of the time, there's like a massive advantage to like having that freedom in Figma and then putting that into Webflow once you've kind of decided the structure. In terms of like the workflow, a lot of the times, and this is kind of comes back to how I think I'll work a lot with growth companies, is usually they have a designer or someone in-house. They'll design the page, they'll go as crazy as you want, and then I can go in, look at it, see it from like a HTML or CSS perspective and be like, okay, this needs to be this needs to be this structure, and then basically build it straight from there. They have a Figma to Webflow plugin now, which is okay. It does kind of work. But I think Webflow have done that because they've kind of seen a world where Figma are integrating into their products a lot more of these HTML and CSS principles, which could eventually mean that they'll have their own website builder themselves and people might not need Webflow. So they're trying to get in there early with the integration.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. That's quite cool. What is the biggest competitor to Webflow, would you say, if there is one?
So, I mean, WordPress is still the biggest player in the market. I think like, I don't know what it is, but like 80% of websites on the internet are built through WordPress. So that will always be a massive player. In terms of like new style designers, a lot of the traditional website builders that were quite templatey before, like Wix, for example, are coming out with their own, basically a copy and paste of Webflow. So they'll be slight competitors. And there's also one called Web Studio as well, which is quite interesting. That's the open source version of Webflow pretty much. And it can also, well, I'm not sure first yet, but they're building it so you can build offline as well. So you can just have it on your computer, similar to how you can kind of code on your computer offline. If Webflow was a true just visual development platform where you're just writing HTML and CSS but visually, then there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that off your desktop pretty much. And that's kind of what Web Studio is trying to do. It'd be interesting to see how it turns out.